Land of the free, home of the brave. That's what makes the United States. Now let's take a journey with the spirit of freedom. Liberty will lead the way.
Let's take a star-spangled adventure. Star-spangled adventure.
All the things you'd want to know about America's in this show. So come on, all you patriots, let's go.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we're engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We've come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live.
What a sad day. We're here in 1863 in Pennsylvania, near the city of Gettysburg, where just a few months ago was the site of a brutal battle. America is at war, but this time with itself. How could this be when just over 80 years ago, America declared itself a new country and was no longer a colony of England? It had to do with both slavery and the rights of states. The country was divided. States in the North didn't have slaves, but the states in the South used slaves for their large farms, which produced the country's food and cotton. Many said the South should free their slaves, but the South said that their states could do whatever their people wanted, even if they were a part of America, and they wanted to keep slavery legal. With America growing and territories becoming states, the issue became, would the new states be like the North and be free, or be like the South and allow slavery? This tension that had been brewing for over 100 years soon exploded. 11 states in the southern half of America decided to secede from the rest of the country. This means they were forming their own country called the Confederate States of America. A few of the slave states, the middle or border states, did not secede from America. The country was in trouble, and Abraham Lincoln was the new president who had to hold the country together and make sure it fulfilled the desires of the founders that everyone in America is free.
It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
So how did Abe Lincoln become president and the one who must hold the Union of the United States together? A few years earlier, he ran for Congress, being one of the first candidates of the new Republican Party that was formed to abolish slavery. He debated with Democrat Stephen Douglas, who was for slavery.
I hold that if any state does not want to allow slavery, then they should not. But if they do wish to own slaves, then they absolutely should have that right.
Allowing states to decide is well and good, only if there's nothing wrong with slavery. But one man owning another is wrong and immoral. Our Declaration says that all are created equal.
Lincoln lost that congressional election, but the debate brought him into the spotlight. People supportive of freeing slaves admired how he articulated slavery as a moral issue. But those in support of slavery found a new enemy. 2 years later, when Lincoln ran for president, 2 things happened. 1, he became the 16th president. 2, because the southern states knew Lincoln would free the country's slaves, they seceded, or left the country, and said they would start a whole new country, even if it took a war to do it.
Standing in the battlefield, lined up for the fight. Every man was marching in his boots, charging up the hill as cannons aimed and fired. Every soldier taught to point and shoot, and brother fought brother against one another, fighting in their war-torn suits. Fighting in their war-torn suits.
So, what do you think, Noah?
To Mr. President, I say it's what you must do to hold this country together.
And as your friend Abe?
To Abe, I say it's the right and moral thing to do, but you will pay the consequences.
I have seen a lot of young men lying on the battlefield, paying even more than I will.
This Emancipation Proclamation will free the slaves in the South, but the Confederacy will fight even harder.
So be it. If my name ever goes into history, it will be for this act, and my whole soul is in it.
After the Emancipation Proclamation, the war raged on as Lincoln was elected to a second term. American slaves were now on the road to freedom. 1 month after being inaugurated into his second term, the South surrendered, and the United States was united once again.
With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations.
5 days after the war was over, President Abraham Lincoln was killed by a former Confederate. Yet Lincoln's legacy of freeing the slaves and keeping the country together, where all are created equal, continues to live on.